All right, peeps. On today's episode of the Kung Fu Genius, the genius will be discussing his late Sifu Grandmaster Kernspecht. Lots of gems, lots of fond memories, lots of, hey, that Chinese guy didn't work out, so you now can be my head man. Okay? How about that? Let's get to it.
And every day, I practice martial arts.
Yo, Dre, how you doing, man?
I'm great, Sifu. How are you, man?
Good. It's our first recording back since all of the festivities of December. So I spend most of that month away in Thailand teaching Wing Chun and also getting, dare I say, a vacation.
Fantastic
My first
vacation,
in many years.
Yeah.
And then came back to New York for 3 to 4 days and then promptly went to South Florida. So I managed to pretty much avoid New York for all of December. And now it is January. It is cold. I am back. So here we are.
I understand. We're going to get into it, man. We're going to get into it. My awesome Sigong has made his transition, and we want to talk about it.
Yeah. So this was the big news at the end of November. Here we are in the first week of January, finally talking about it, mainly because I've been out of the country. And it was a little weird getting the news because, there's
sudden.
There's like certain people in your life that you just assume they're always going to be there. Like in my mind, I thought I was going to be like in my 70s and Sifu would just be there because he's always there. And even if you understand it intellectually, like in your mind, they're like just certain people you think like they're always going to be there.
Yeah. Like what I think, what I believe.
Right.
Yeah.
About who?
About my Sifu.
Oh, well, that ain't happening. That ain't happening. No. Fiery plane crash next year.
That's happening.
So, anyway, I certainly didn't imagine that it would happen so suddenly, it was a weird thing because it's not like Sifu was sick for a long time and we knew it was coming. And, he was older and he definitely had some issues here and there as anyone that age has, but it wasn't anything like that he was sick or to any great degree. And from what I understand, he kind of caught something like a bug, a flu type thing or whatever, and it was pretty rapid. So the one thing we can say is it wasn't something that like dragged out for a long time, but it is weird to kind of think of the Wing Chun landscape without him, especially as anyone who's in the Learning Wing Chun realm. Obviously, Sifu Keith Kernspecht is a huge part of why our particular branch of Yip Man Wing Chun was so popular, right? It's mainly, as much as Sifu Learning wants to kind of prop up all of his success as his own, a majority of Sifu Learning's success, his brand of WT is what Sifu Kernspecht and the EWTO were able to do. His success is, their success of the success of the EWTO, I should say, is pretty much what Sifu Learning piggybacked off of for his career. And so, it's weird to see and to think of the landscape without him around. And you unfortunately didn't have a chance to see him though.
I did not.
Yeah. So the him coming to there were so in the Learning organization, there's like a lot of like weird rules, right? Now in the more recent years, I think just because of the internet and the open exchange between people of various martial arts factions, that a lot of the control and power that the singular organizations had, especially over their own members, it really doesn't exist anymore. But 10, 20, 30 years ago, it was a very different landscape. And even to this day, there's still some dinosaurs. And I know this because I occasionally teach former students who are either part of the IWTA or from former students of, and so on and so forth. So they tell me kind of what's going on in their respective associations or in the big association. Okay. And the number of times when like people leave the association and they're not allowed to like be Facebook or Instagram friends with people who are like part of their former organization or no longer. There are some pockets of like Learning's organization.
There's a word for that, right?
I think it's called shunning when someone leaves like usually a cult or like a religious sect then you are shunned by the current leaders, right?
Ostracized.
Ostracized. That's the word I was thinking of. Ostracized.
And so what they do is, like the current members cannot contact the former members, and then they try to, do this, that, and the other thing. But I think what a lot of the proponents of that very old school mentality who are still in the Leungting organization don't realize is that the Leungting organization as like an entity, it doesn't really have any pull or kind of marketing power. I mean, the thing is that single name organizations really don't have that much marketing power in the general martial arts world. I mean, if you thought of Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu, you just think of BJJ. If you know a little bit more about it, you would know, okay, well, there's like the Gracies and the guys who come from the Helio Gracie side who, if they're more traditional to those methods, they're probably more focused on self-defense. And the majority of Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu now is maybe really focused on BJJ competition. So there's been a little bit of a schism between like kind of the more self-defense oriented style and a sport Jiu-Jitsu grappling style.
Yeah.
And then you would go like, well, what are the prominent organizations? Well, you have like the Gracie Academy and Gracie Barra and like a few other ones. But those are not like household names in terms like people know BJJ. And the same thing in Wing Chun. Like maybe in the 80s and the 90s, people who are into it, they might go like, oh, this is William Cheung Wing Chun, Leungting Wing Chun, so on and so forth. But like these name brands don't really exist anymore. People just go, well, if they even want to do Wing Chun or traditional martial art, then they just seek out the person that they want to learn from. And it's not only about the lineage anymore, right?
I see.
But it's also about like, what can this person do? What can this person teach me, right? So it's interesting that a lot of the guys in the Leungting organization still kind of think that, oh, if someone leaves and then they're no longer part of that organization, that's somehow going to hurt their marketing. Whereas if you're marketing a school, you market locally, people come to your school, they take an intro class, they like it, and they join. They don't know anything about your association or your affiliation or any of that kind of stuff.
No, I didn't know anything.
Yeah, and the organization thinks that like your potential customer is like someone with interest in Wing Chun, but not so much interest that they've done Wing Chun yet, but enough interest that they know the difference between the various organizations and know somehow the Leungting organization is good, and they're going to come to you to learn it, right?
Right.
So they believe this unicorn of a customer exists somewhere in the continental USA, right? And it's nothing like that at all.
No.
People see your advertisement wherever it is, they come by, they check it out, they like it, they join, and then once they join, most people retroactively justify their reasons using logic. Okay, well, I'm doing this style because it's good for self-defense or because they represent Leungting or this or that. But those explanations usually come after the fact. Like, because you come, you see something, you like it, and you join. And everything else you just kind of fit in afterwards, right?
Yeah, I got to see your ad on Facebook. And you were right around the corner.
That's right.
From my job.
Yeah. So that's how it works, right?
Man.
So having said that, Sifu Kernspecht, was the pioneer of Wing Chun in Europe. You have to imagine that the martial arts scene in some aspects in Europe was a little bit behind the martial arts scene in the US. By the 1960s, we already had regular karate tournaments on every corner. Like a lot of those tournaments that Bruce Lee would do demonstrations at. And then by the 70s, you already started to get like full contact karate. You had judo, you had karate, you had a bunch of other styles. And then after Bruce Lee, made Kung Fu popular in the bigger cities, LA, New York, San Francisco, in the Chinatowns, you could even find like Kung Fu, right? But in the 1970s in Europe, in Germany in particular, it was like karate and judo, if you were lucky. Judo, because it was an Olympic sport and relatively widespread, and karate, because it was the more prominent one, right? But you weren't going to find something exotic like Wing Chun in Germany or Jeet Kune Do or, Choi Lei Fut or something like that, because there wasn't really a real Chinese community in Germany. Most of the Asians, if there were Asians in Germany, they came from Vietnam, usually from East Germany. You had North Vietnamese there. So you didn't really have, like the Chinese restaurants in Germany are all run by Vietnamese people, just like the sushi places here are all run by Koreans or Chinese, right?
All right.
So it's one of those things, right? So you have to imagine in the 70s, there's like just karate and judo. And now suddenly this thing called Wing Chun comes on the scene. And this is the style that Bruce Lee did. People know who Bruce Lee is. And it's this guy, Kernspecht, teaching it in Germany. And that's like the guy you go to learn it from, right? And so you have to look at it in that context as well. He kind of brought something that was really exotic and new to a marketplace that had nothing like it. I mean, you really literally just had karate and judo.
Now, when he started, did he, because I understand he was in a castle, or he taught from a castle. However, did he start in that castle?
So the castle came later.
Okay.
So Sifu is from a town called Kiel. Kiel is in the north. It's like all the way in the north. It's a port town.
Is it spelled with the K-E-I-L?
K-I-E-L.
Okay.
Yeah, and then it's very close to Hamburg, which is another northern city. And then he had done other martial arts growing up. He had done some karate, and he was big into weightlifting and powerlifting.
Yeah.
So when you see the photos of my Sifu from that time, it was
like a bear, Russian bear.
Dude, yes. Yeah. And so he was like, into powerlifting and bodybuilding. He was into karate, some other martial arts and things like that. He was living in London for a while in the early 70s. And that's where he had his first exposure to Wing Chun.
He kind of looked like Hillbilly Jim from WWF days.
From the World
before,
Wildlife Federation?
Yeah, before WWE.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So
it was Hillbilly Jim.
Well, he also did like wrestling and catch as can wrestling and stuff. So he was quite like into all the different martial arts before being into mixed martial arts was like a thing, right? And then when he was living in London in the early 70s, he came across a Wing Chun
lived
school.
in London?
Yeah, I think he was studying English or teaching English, yeah. And he went to the London Chinatown to look for a martial arts school and ended up finding the Wing Chun school of a guy named Joseph Chang, who was like a grand student of Yip Man. And that guy, Joseph Chang, wouldn't really teach him because he was only teaching Chinese. It was still like in that time period.
Okay.
But Sifu would show up every day with like a bottle of Johnny Walker and give it to him as a gift for letting him watch. And he would basically let him watch every day. And then what Sifu would do is he would go back to his house or wherever he was staying with his wife, and they would practice what they saw. So that's how he started to basically learn, albeit like indirectly from Joseph Chang. And then at some point, Joseph Chang said, like, well, you've basically stolen everything you can from me. Yeah. If you want to learn proper Wing Chun, you should contact Leung Teng. He's one of the best in Hong Kong. He's very famous. And then Sifu got a hold of a couple of those early Wing Chun books by Kun Wei, which is Leung Teng's publication. There was like a series of like 3 to 4 little mini books that Sifu Leung Teng published in the early 70s. And I have
one of these?
No. Those are the ones that came later in the 80s.
Oh, okay.
Now these were like these almost like not pamphlets, but like a little bit bigger than a pamphlet. And they're really interesting because they actually showed and demonstrated Wing Chun in a lot of detail. Pamphlet. And Sifu Leung Teng explains like the theory, center line, all this kind of stuff in like a really good detail. As a matter of fact, I have copies of them, but as PDFs. I don't have hard copies, but I do have them, and they're some of my, in terms of like just Wing Chun info, they're super valuable because I feel like the really early stuff that Sifu Leung Teng wrote before he became big and corrupted, I suppose. Like he was really earnestly trying to teach and give out that information. He was a lot more like willing to explain.
He was Anakin Skywalker.
Yeah, before he turned to the dark side, right?
Before the fire hit him.
Or became the dark side, right? So then Sifu started reading these books, and he really liked Leung Teng's explanations of Wing Chun, so he started doing what you did back in those days, was you started writing letters, right? Because that's the only way you could get a hold of someone. So Sifu started this like regular letter writing campaign, like every week, sending another
bottle of Johnny Walker in the mail.
I don't think he was sending that. Sifu Leung Teng's not really much of a drinker,
okay.
But he sent him
cookies.
He sent him like those letters, and then eventually they decided to invite Sifu Leung Teng to come and teach in Germany. And Sifu Leung Teng was like impressed with the fact that Sifu Kernspecht had already had competency in karate and jiu-jitsu and wrestling, and had done some Wing Chun before. So based on like his previous experience, Sifu Leung Teng thought, well, I could teach this guy relatively quickly, and then he could become like my representative for Europe because he already kind of has a head start, right? So eventually they talk on the phone, and Sifu Leung Teng does what he often does. He's also done it to me, and he's done it to other people, where he promises some shit that he doesn't intend to follow through on at all. And so he told Sifu Kernspecht, like, okay, you will be my representative for Germany. Okay, which is like a good thing, right?
Cool.
I'll teach you, you'll represent my style in Germany, and like that's how we'll go. Great. And then it's like, a month or so before Sifu Leungting is supposed to come for the first demonstration and seminar and teaching and so on. And Sifu Kernspecht gets a package in the mail from this other guy advertising a seminar in Germany, the first seminar with Leungting in Germany. And Sifu looks at this thing at first and assumes, well, this is like some guy doing advertising for him, right? For his Kiel thing.
For his thing.
Only to see that this seminar is in another location in Germany. And it says that this guy, who's a Chinese guy in Germany hosting Leungting, is the German chief instructor. It's the chief instructor for Leungting Wing Chun in Germany. The same title that Leungting had like just promised Kernspecht over the phone. All right. And so this is something he does this all the time. Oh, you want to be the new head man of my association for so and so? Okay, yes, all right, fine.
No.
And then like head man normally means like you're responsible for that area, right? Anything that happens in that area, you're kind of the boss. But then he'll a week later say someone else can be the head man one across the street from you or whatever. So I mean, like this is like he does this shit all the time. All right,
that was his first like
that was
Leungting moment.
I don't know if that was his first one, but that was his first one for Sifu Kernspecht, right?
Right.
So it's like already from the beginning, he had not yet met Sifu Leungting, and Sifu Leungting already kind of betrayed him, like already. Like, no, I have this other guy. So then it turns out,
goodness gracious,
Sifu Leungting finally makes it to Germany.
That is bananas.
Sifu talks to him like, hey, what's the deal with this guy? Like, you said I was the only guy, whatever, right?
Oh, God.
And, Sifu Leungting was like, oh, well, that guy, he didn't work out. Don't worry. You're the official guy. Right. But you know what I mean? It's not like,
it didn't work out.
It already stopped working out with that guy before I offered you that thing or whatever. It was just kind of like, because you know what he did? He just like, he didn't want to put all his money on one horse, right? So he gets these two guys, he sees which one is going to pan out, and then he just goes with that one, right? Because this is straight from Sifu Leungting's playbook. This is how he handles everything, right? So just one, never 2 feet in the boat, always 1 foot in the boat, right? So that was right from the beginning. All right.
Wow.
And again, it's on to make this episode any kind of diatribe on Sifu Leungting. I've done other
mind
episodes
trip
on that. But it gives you a little bit of an idea behind why Sifu Kernspecht could be the most successful representative of Leungting Wing Chun on paper, because the EWTO is Leungting's representation in Europe, even though what the EWTO offers now maybe doesn't quite look like what Sifu Leungting teaches. And I'm not saying that is a good or bad thing. I'm just saying like the European representative for Leungting Wing Chun doesn't really focus on stuff that exclusively looks like Leungting Wing Chun. They do other things there as well, right? And then but why? Because when you're dealing with a traditional Chinese Sifu, I mean, if you're not teaching his methods, you're not doing things the way your teacher wants you to do, at some point they're gonna kick you out or tell you you're not qualified or whatever, right? So how come the largest representative of Leungting Wing Chun can essentially teach whatever they want and still somehow have some tacit connection to Leungting? Well, I mean, the short version of that is when you hear the story that I just told you about their very first interaction, and then you know that right from the beginning, the story is it's like when you're watching a movie and you have to know, is the narrator of the movie reliable or not? Because sometimes if you have an unreliable narrator, where like the narrator might not know they're lying or they might not know what's going on, actually makes for a very interesting story. If you know, like for example, Fight Club, the movie Fight Club, you have an unreliable narrator because he doesn't really know everything that's going on. But that also can be really fun, right? And other times you have a reliable narrator, right? Yeah. So I think Sifu knew from very early on that he had a very unreliable narrator with Sifu Leungting. And I think that changed a lot of how he dealt with him and how he had to obviously embrace him because he's the guy who's teaching the style that they're teaching in Germany, but he also has to keep them at arm's length, and more importantly, he has to protect the students from the influence of Sifu Leungting.
Oh,
right?
right.
So you can imagine that that's the reason why then, you flash forward 30, 40 years, why Leungting's biggest representative in Europe can do whatever they want, and Leungting can't say anything because Sifu Leungting's basically just being paid to leave them alone and let them do their thing, right? Now, of course, that doesn't bar Sifu Leungting from doing stuff in Eastern Europe, like in Hungary and Romania and Lithuania and countries like that, which are traditionally under his control. That wasn't part of the EWTO domain. But you cannot compare the success of Wing Chun in countries like Hungary, Romania, Lithuania with the success in Western Europe. And it's not to say that the Eastern European Wing Chun has not been successful. They have had a lot of numbers, but not quite the same as the EWTO. And also in Hungary, you also cannot charge as much as you can in Western Europe. So financially, there's a huge difference in terms of the numbers. The European organization in the East could effectively be twice the size of the EWTO, but they wouldn't earn close to the money. So it's easy to kind of misconstrue what people are seeing when they see a really big seminar in Hungary compared to when they see a medium seminar in Europe, or in Western Europe, I should say. So it's also pretty clear that kind of post death of my Sifu, that Sifu Leungting is trying to promote his Eastern Wing Chun faction as being the ascendant one, because he gave Norbert like the same level he has, the 10th level. And so it's like, oh, we have a Grandmaster here teaching the real Hong Kong style. So I can kind of see that. I think it's a little bit of a disingenuous kind of move on Sifu Leungting's part. And by the way, I could be totally wrong. I could just be seeing that and it's not there. But based on the lack of statements that the Hungarian section of Leungting's organization said nothing about Sifu Kernspecht's death. And that's very telling, especially when you know what their feelings are about these people, like behind the scenes, and then that they didn't have a public statement. It shows a lot about how basically classless Norbert is. It's exactly what you would expect from him. And even the official IWTA statement on the Leungting's Facebook page or whatever was obviously not written by Leungting, and it's not the send off to someone who basically made you. You know what I mean? And then I think the most heartfelt statement about Sifu Kernspecht's passing from that side was Leungting's son John, who posted it on his private Facebook, but that's only to be seen by people on his private Facebook, right? But the chances they had to kind of make a nice public statement about it, they really, as is usually the case with the IWTA, they really shit the bed on that stuff, right? So anyway, but I don't want to harp too much on that. I want to talk a little bit about, kind of some of the funny or interesting things that happened when I left Leungting's organization in terms of my relationship with Sifu Kernspecht. Because as you know, in Chinese Kung Fu, you have one Sifu, right? I mean, some Americans don't know that, and maybe they train in a progressive school or a school that doesn't follow Chinese protocol, and they don't know, like, you can't call every Tom, Dick, and Harry Sifu, right? Right. In Chinese martial arts, you have one paternal teacher or mentor in your style. And that person you would simply just address as Sifu, and the first character Si meaning like teacher or coach, the second character Fu meaning father. All right, so this really means like a paternal mentor. But there's another character that is identically pronounced, a second Fu character, which means like an expert or a coach. And both the Sifu are pronounced identically, but one has the second Fu means father or paternal mentor, and the other one means like expert. So if someone is a Sifu, but they're not your Sifu, they're a Sifu of a style or whatever, you would address them as Sifu plus their surname. If it was Chinese, the surname is first a Wang Sifu, right? A Lei Sifu, right? Or Sifu Li, Sifu Wang, if you want to do it in a Western way. But if someone is your personal Sifu in a style, you just call them Sifu without their name.
There you go.
So that's how you kind of mitigate that. And then when we write that when we alphabetize that, we usually write like your own personal Sifu. You would write SI-FU, like two separate things. Yeah. And if it's just a title, like an honorific for someone who's a Sifu but not yours, you write SIFU, no dash, plus their name. And then that's like a real simple shorthand to kind of keep that thing straight, right?
Mhm.
So my initial Sifu in Wing Chun was Sifu Imin Bostepe. And but what you have to understand is in WT at that time, a lot of the schools in the US, they were run by like a junior instructor who was maybe not a Sifu level themselves, but they were like an advanced student that's running like what you can call like a working group to kind of keep their own practice up, right?
Okay.
So that meant that if you join one of these local schools, you're really joining a working group where you're just kind of under a Siheng. But since you have to have a Sifu in Wing Chun, in Chinese martial arts, the association of the country where you're taking Wing Chun, they basically assign you a Sifu. So that's why many of us who started learning in the States in those days, who are learning from like lower level people, our Sifu was always someone at the LA headquarters, usually Emin Boztepe, right?
Okay.
Because he was the chief instructor for the US. So I started training in this like local area school, and then I got this Wing Chun passport with like who my Sifu is. It's Sifu Emin Boztepe, right? Of course, Emin Boztepe is very famous, particularly with his altercation with William Cheung and stuff. So it was like, hey, cool, I have this like famous guy as a Sifu, but he wasn't the guy who was like teaching me day in and day out.
Right.
And I would see Sifu Emin at seminars, but it wasn't like, yeah, he was my Sifu, but he wasn't like really the person teaching me, right?
Mm-hmm.
Then I eventually go to Germany after reading Sifu Kernspecht's book on single combat, which had an ad for the castle in there. I'm like,
How much
what I
later
wanna-
after that? After you started with Sifu Emin?
Well, I started WT after I had done non-classical Wing Chun for many years.
Yeah.
So I started WT probably late 99,
Uh-huh.
and I did it for about a year. And then
Gotcha.
I'm like, I'm going to Germany. I want to do this full time. I wasn't in WT that long before I decided to do it full time.
I see.
And because I had Sifu Kernspecht's book that had an ad for the castle in there. Like,
Right.
you want to become an instructor, you can train full time. I'm like, yeah, that's what I want to do. So
There you go.
Yeah. So anyway, I go to Germany. I start training Wing Chun. And about my last year there, I was there for 3 years. Sifu Emin leaves the organization. All right. There's all that stuff. I mean, it's old stories. No need to relitigate that shit here. But he basically leaves. And then so suddenly, the guy who was my Sifu is no longer part of the association. So that also then creates a weird wrinkle in the traditional you only have one Sifu kind of gambit, right? Because I don't want to leave the Leung Ting organization because that's where I'm getting my training from. But my Sifu is no longer part of the organization. So my question was, well, then if we're following the one Sifu rule, then technically my Sifu will always be Emin, even if that's not the guy who continues to teach me, right? So I wanted to sort this out. So I wrote a letter. This is while I was in Germany.
Back
I wrote
in
a
the letter
letter.
days, yeah.
I wrote a letter to the headquarters at the castle, explaining my situation, that I am now a Ronin, a fatherless, a masterless student, right?
Ronin.
And what should I do?
Ronin, Alex.
And to my surprise, I got a handwritten response from Sifu Kernspecht directly on this. And this was my first like real interaction with him, because in Germany at that time, I had seen him at seminars. You know, he comes in like a celebrity, teaches, and then he leaves, and you're at a seminar with like 100 other people. So it's not this kind of intimate setting. So yeah, I had seen him many times, but never had the chance to really interact with him. And then he wrote back. He says, "Well, in this kind of situation, if a Sifu is ousted or kicked out or no longer part of an organization,
ostracized,
then your Sigong will become your Sifu, and that is me." So that's what he wrote there. So he says, like, then your Sigong will become your Sifu, and that is me. And then he wrote, your Sifu, Keith Kernspecht. So that was basically him saying, like, I'm your Sifu now. So I was like, right, that's what he said.
Wow.
It's the rule in the association.
That's the rule.
And now I have jumped up a level in the family tree, right? Which is important for other people. It's not really, I don't care about that kind of stuff, right? But that was it, and that's basically how Sifu Kernspecht became.
Jumped the whole generation.
Yeah.
Yo.
So then my passport was amended, and then it was Sifu Kernspecht was my Sifu, right? But again, that really didn't change a whole lot in terms of who I was learning from. I was learning from my instructors at the castle, Sifu Heinrich Pfaff, Sifu Thomas Schrön, Sifu Bernd Wagner, those guys there. And then eventually I left Germany and came back to the States, and then I became a student of Sifu Leung Ting and Sifu Carson Lau. So then, even though my Sifu is Sifu Kernspecht, basically from the moment I started teaching in the U.S., I was exclusively learning from Hong Kong-based instructors.
I see. Yes.
So for many years, I didn't really have any contact or relationship with my Sifu. He was just my Sifu on paper. I was learning from my Sigong, Elman Leung, Sifu Carson Lau, all of these guys, right?
Hey, Kung Fu Genius fans, if you like what we do here, please consider supporting us on Patreon. For as little as $5 a month, you'll get early access to episodes and other goodies not posted on the Kung Fu Genius channel. With higher levels of support, you can get your name in the description, a live chat with me, or at the baller level, you even get your own personal KFG episode with me as my guest. The link to our Patreon page is in the description of this episode below. Patreons have a direct link to chat with me and get first dibs on any questions for Ask Me Anything episodes. Click on the link in the description for our Patreon page for more information, and I'll see you on Patreon.
You know, there's in the whole kind of story arc of this, there's a whole bit where, and I don't want to get like too into it now because I really want to spend more time talking about Sifu, but there was a whole period where Sifu Leungting really tried to get me to hate the EWTO because he's always had kind of like a love-hate relationship, even though it's his own organization, even though it's the organization that arguably puts the most amount of money in his pocket. It's like he's got this thing where it's like he likes the success, but he doesn't like the fact that his student is more successful than him. It's like you could be so successful that you give me $10,000 a month. And I would be so happy.
Which is my goal.
But somehow that level of success cannot exceed my level of success.
Yeah, that's not part of my goal though.
Even if I'm not making $10,000 on my own.
Right.
But you're making it.
Oh no.
So I'm happy I have that success, but somehow I'm still jealous that you're making that money and I'm not, but I am still making the money you're giving me.
Yeah.
So it's a weird thing that he's got where he's kind of jealous of you know where his money's coming from.
It's free money,
right?
Man. Free money.
Exactly. Look,
just like
if I was earning $100 on my own and you were paying me $12,000 a month, I'd give zero shits. Your success would be my success. All right. I wouldn't be in there trying to sabotage it the way Sifu Leungting constantly tries to sabotage and bite the hand that feeds him, right?
Goodness gracious.
So, but he really did try to get me to like hate the EWTO and tell me that like, oh, they had done this and this to him, and you know, any kind of failures that Leungting had, he had perfectly propped it up that it was somehow the fault of the EWTO or somehow the fault of Sifu Kernspecht. Every single thing that he ever messed up on. In general, he always finds someone to blame, and he would often find like the Western European organization was to blame for all that stuff, right? So, anyway, it left me kind of feeling like, all right, well, you know, I'm with my Sigong now, and you know, I don't have anything to do with the EWTO. And then there was an incident that happened. I'll probably talk about it maybe when I write my memoirs. So I'm not ready to talk about it now.
Oh, not
but
just
there was an incident that happened regarding the Hungarian instructor. And it made me realize that I was being manipulated by both Sifu Leungting and the Hungarian instructor. And it made it very clear, like, oh, this thing that I was stressed out about is something they created. And they were doing this thing to me. And here it is. And you can see it plain as day. And that was one of the kind of final straws that broke the camel's back, right? Because towards the end of my time there, I started to look around and go like, okay, this is how they're treating me, and I'm like their New York representative with success in schools, and that's how they're treating me.
And you're putting all this money in their pocket.
Yeah, and I'm going like, all right, at some point you realize you're being clowned, right? So anyway, secretly, this actually started to bring Sifu and I closer together. Because after this incident happened, I had to apologize to Sifu because I had realized maybe a little too late that I was being played. Like I was being played hard by both those guys. Wow. And Sifu was like, no, don't worry about it. I understand. Like he knew that was what was going on. I just need to see it for myself. And then in 2011, that was the year that I quit the IWTA. Students weren't happy. No one was happy. The association just wasn't working out for it. And my problem was never with Sifu Leungting. It was always with the hacks that he put in charge of his U.S. association, which to this day still haven't done shit. Haven't built it, haven't done anything, right? So I, wrote my, email to him saying that, I just couldn't do this anymore, but it was really hard for me to send it because being part of a martial art organization for so many years was also part of my identity.
So you had it typed out.
Yeah.
Just couldn't press that
I was
send yet.
Leung Ting's representative for New York. I represented Leung Ting Wing Chun. I wore his uniform. I had his flag on my wall.
Yeah.
It was like I was the guy you came to for that, right? So it was a big part of my identity.
That was like a couple years before I joined.
It was a big part of my identity. So to give that up is to basically say, well, hey, I stand on my own. Can I do that, right? So it was really scary, especially because Sifu Leung Ting always force feeds it into your head that the typical abusive kind of framing, you'll be nothing without me kind of thing, right?
Oh, goodness.
And so you really do think that, even as a grown man, right? So but of course, at that point, the thing that I had not yet learned were the knives. Still haven't learned the knives. I don't want to go to Alan Fong and learn his half-remembered version. Or I don't want any of that, right? So I called Sifu Kernspecht. And I was like, Sifu, like, I don't think I can stay in this association. And the funny thing is, he technically still represents Leung Ting, right?
Yeah.
And he knew what was going on. I had talked to him about this stuff for a while, and I was like, I can't do it. And he's like, no, totally makes sense. And then I'm like, yeah, but I still haven't finished learning, the knives, and I feel weird, like I'm going away from my family, and like if I don't want to be disloyal, but I can't stay in this association anymore, which is just it's causing more problems than it's solving, right? And he said something that I never thought the top representative of Leung Ting Wing Chun would ever say to me. He said, Alex, just quit. He says, you'll be much better off. And he goes, and if you want to learn the knives, you just come to me in Germany and I will teach you personally. And so
there you go.
To have then the offer from Sifu Leung Ting's top student, who, by the way, Sifu Leung Ting doesn't regularly praise people, but he did praise my Sifu in a couple categories just over the years. And one of them is he said that my Sifu was one of the few who really understood the weapons and got good at them because he practiced. And then, like, I remember he said that to me years before. And then to have that guy be the one who could teach me the knives was like, wow. And to learn it then from my own Sifu. So most of what I learned in Wing Chun, I got from, my Si Hengs, my Si Zoks, my Si Gong, the higher generation. And then, like, for the final technique, I'll get that from my Sifu himself, right?
Right.
So, and I felt like, okay, I can leave the association, but I haven't left my Kung Fu family. My Sifu, my Kung Fu father's still there. All the people that I'm still cool with, they're cool with me even if I leave the association. And the people who are not cool with me anymore because I left the association weren't ever really my friends to begin with. I tell you one thing about leaving the associations, you see immediately who your friends are. All right, because tons of people were like, hey, I'm still there for you. And then the other people have to toe the company line and can't even talk to me. And then you're like, all right, it tells me everything I need to know. And if you asked me the day before, I probably could have guessed who those people would have been. And it was exactly who I thought it was, right?
That eye-opening moment.
Yeah. So to have like the support of my Sifu when I'm about to quit, what was a big part of my identity for the previous whatever number of years, made it a lot easier. So then I went back home. I sent that email and I started City Wing Chun on my own and then decided to kind of, do things in my own way, kind of respecting where I came from, but also building upon that. Right. And then went to Germany and learned the knives from my Sifu, learned stuff from my seeing Giuseppe Scembri and, really he gave me access to everything that I wanted to have access to. While, having no problem with me going to Hong Kong and training with those guys. So I could go to Europe and see what he was working on. I could go to Hong Kong. I could do my own thing. And then Sifu started to see me, I think, a little bit as an ally or a helpful resource. Because then he would always send me messages on WeChat or WhatsApp. Sometimes he would have like a Chinese question like, hey, dear Alex, like, what does this character mean or something like that. And it was funny to be the guy that my Sifu would go to for Chinese stuff. Yeah. And in 2018, he started to make plans to write his biography, his autobiography. And and so he invited this guy to come over to kind of, the guy would basically be the author, right? And he would interview him and we'd give all the information. The problem was that Sifu had forgotten some of the little facts and details and stuff. So he invited me to come to Kiel to be there on some of those interviews because according to Sifu, I remembered a lot of his life story better than he did. And then because of like my ability to remember all those details. So there we were, like in Kiel, Germany, around 2018, and
I remember that trip.
Yeah, and then he's asking him all these questions, and then Sifu looks at me, and I'm like, yeah, and at that time, so and so was teaching at the Hong Kong headquarters, and then so this is the reason why he couldn't come to Germany, and and I had all this stuff, and then Sifu kind of looked at the author, he's like, yeah, I mean that's why I brought him. He knows, he knows all that stuff, right?
Cool.
So I was there kind of to fill in some weird gaps. And one thing that has come out about or since Sifu's passing is that he did a audio. He finally did that audio biography.
Yeah.
But it seemed he didn't do it in book form. He did it. He recorded it as an audio.
Yeah. Like a literal audio biography.
Yeah. So it's available on Spotify. It's of course in German. So I listened to it over the course of my time in Thailand, and it was bittersweet because to hear his voice again, like telling his life story. He recorded it during the pandemic when there wasn't much to do, and
perfect time.
Yeah, and almost like given how everything happened, like he did it in time because otherwise he wouldn't have done it. And he it was bittersweet because like I'm listening to his voice. He's telling his story. I was just with him in Hong Kong last year. I just was chatting with him a few months ago, right? And it's also bittersweet because some of those stories he tells in there are the stories that I was invited to help clarify. So I'm like, I remember when we talked about this. And I remember when we talked about this, right? So there was the little bit of an extra connection.
How long is this recording?
I think it's like 7 or 8 chapters. Each chapter is like maybe 6 to 8 chapters. Each chapter is about 35 minutes. Yeah. And tells his story in detail, but there's so much of his story.
And it's in German.
It's in German, yeah. There's so much of his story that he doesn't go into just because of time. But, it's like, I know a lot of other stories. I'm like, and I wish he would have talked about this and this. And also, he didn't really mention any of his students by name. And I can understand that because, like, some of his students, like Emin, like those guys left. There was maybe some bad blood or whatever. But I would have wished a longer version where he talked about some people, like some more people individually. Like he just missed like the individual stories about certain people. I think just because he's trying to avoid being political. But I would have liked to have heard like, specific stories about specific people. And the last chapter, he kind of has an epilogue afterwards. And it's almost perfect. I mean, maybe we just look at it that way after someone passes away. But it's poetic because it talks about what he was looking for in martial arts and why he was never bound to just doing Wing Chun in the traditional way. And that epilogue comes off almost like, here's the mission you have to take over after I'm gone. And I don't mean me personally. I mean like as martial artists.
Okay.
Because it's kind of like a call to research and develop and to build things further than the way you got them. And so that was like really bittersweet to hear that kind of almost like he's giving. Because I mean, when you listen to those things, when you listen to an audio of someone talking for a period of time, even though they're recording this thing for mass consumption, you have the feeling like you were sitting there in a car and he's telling you. Wow. Especially if you know my Sifu, like it sounds like I'm on a drive with Sifu. We got 3 hours, and he's telling me like about the first time he met Lang Teng. Yeah, and he just kind of goes through it, and it's very kind of clear and everything, and so you get that feeling, and then at the end, it's kind of like, and that's all she wrote. You know what I mean? It was nice to hear that again, and to hear that kind of epilogue almost framed as like this is what we want you guys to do, right? Now,
amazing,
because I was no longer Lang Teng's representative after 2011. in the Langting organization, you're not really supposed to. Well, like an ex-member technically cannot go to seminars in the association anymore because you are now no longer part of it, whatever. Although what they often forget is ex-members normally don't want to come back to seminars. Like, oh, if you become an ex-member, you can never go to our seminars again. And it's always like, well, I'm pretty sure if someone becomes an ex-member, they don't want to go to your seminars anymore, right?
They've come to that conclusion first.
But yeah, it's very strange. They so overvalue what they think like the brand is, right? So Sifu would occasionally invite me to come to Europe to do private training with him and then to go to some instructor seminars there, right? And then he would just give me some European uniform so I would blend in, and he'd be like, oh, no one will notice who you are.
Yeah.
And I would walk in there and someone would be like, hey, aren't you Sifu Alex Richter? And then Sifu would make a joke, more people know who you are than I thought. He would always try to have me in there as a ringer, like just a normal guy who's hanging out with him, and everyone's like, hey, I know you.
That's great.
So that plan never worked out.
You couldn't just blend in.
Yeah, no, I couldn't just blend in. And
Stop
then he had actually visited New York once.
I heard about this trip. Yeah.
During that time when, I'm no longer representing Langting. So
what year was this?
I want to say it's around 2015, 2016, something like that. He came with Natalie, and they were here to meet someone because at that time he was getting really into all this like internal stuff. It's his adoptive daughter.
Okay.
And he, was getting into a lot of this internal stuff, and he was researching these different teachers, and there was someone here in New York, and he came to see that guy. Mm-hmm. And then while he was here, I got to hang out with my Sifu in New York, and that was still back in the day of the 2-floor school, so I got to show my Sifu my 2-floor school and my big-ass fan and everything like that. And then I had a bit of a secret meeting because, no one could let on that he was in the States visiting me or something like that because, I was no longer the representative or whatever, right? And then so it was just me, Craig, Elliot, and Nicole.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, so they got to meet with Sifu here in New York, and then we went to the school, and they got to do some cheese out with him, right?
Oh, goodness.
And then the second time my students got to see him was at last year's Ultimate Hong Kong Kung Fu Tour, which, as I'm about to do the tour, Sifu's like, hey, can I come with you to Hong Kong? And it's like incredible because I was like, yeah, of course. I mean, I was very nervous because now like my Sifu is going to be there.
Yeah.
But I felt I was very happy that he, I guess, assumed that my knowledge of Hong Kong was deep enough that it would be worthwhile for him to go there, even though he had been to Hong Kong multiple times and so on and so forth. So I was more than honored. And had no idea in hindsight that would be the last time that I would see him, There was something about that trip.
Unreal.
That, I want to like kind of want to say, but, it's always easy in hindsight to kind of like paint a narrative after the fact and be like, oh, this is what was going on. Even though that may not be what was going on. But I remember distinctly thinking during that trip last year when Sifu was in Hong Kong with me, like, this is probably going to be his last, if not one of the last trips ever to Hong Kong. Namely, just because, one, his age is in his late 70s. Yeah. It's not a matter of I'm expecting him to die soon. It's just a matter of statistics and math. All right. There are many places I've been in my life that I will probably never go to again because I will be going other places, right? So at some point, every time is the last time you're going to do something. There'll be a last cup of coffee. There'll be a last time looking at a full moon. There'll be a last time listening to the beach at night. You just never know when that last time for that thing is. That's why you have to really appreciate it in the moment, right? And I remember being on that trip and just thinking like, yeah, Sifu's probably... It's like a very strenuous trip to take from Germany, especially at his age. Okay. To come all the way to Hong Kong. So I'm thinking, he's probably not going to probably doesn't have a whole lot more of these in him. And he probably really doesn't want to come to Hong Kong unless someone like me is there because I can be that bridge between like the Chinese chaos and like I can speak German to him and like put it into German in nice, sensible format. Right. Wow. And also I know where everything is. So it's like I'm the best guide. So I thought, it's probably going to be like one of the last times he'll come here, right? And I remember thinking about that during the trip. I just had no idea that like he would only live for about another year.
That is trippy, man.
But I remember like just thinking how blessed when we went up to Yip Man's grave and to have a photo with my own Sifu at Yip Man's grave.
Yeah.
The last time he had been there was 1979. He was taken up there by Leung Toon, Leung Ting's brother, and who showed him all these triad rituals when they went up there and stuff like that. But it was cool.
That's cool.
It was cool, like, for me to be that person, because I know, as cool as it would have been with Leung Toon, but Leung Toon would have spoken English with like a thick accent, and I can like explain to my Sifu like, why was it this cemetery? And I could like probably give him the history that Leung Toon didn't give him when he went there the first time, and explain exactly like all this stuff and why the other graves are older
in his
and
language.
In his language, and kind of make it like, you know, so that I kind of felt was like, yeah, this was what I was born for, like to be that, and it was cool to have that with him, and to go to dim sum, and to introduce him to Mak Sifu, and to have him see Bei Logan, and you know, to do a lot of the things that we did in Hong Kong, and to spend that time. Obviously, our weird, ill-fated meeting with Leung Ting himself, that dinner that we had to have, and having the. Now, I don't know how much I talked about this before, because I did talk about how I had to meet with Leung Ting on that trip when we did the recap. In fact, I think we had that conversation or something, right? But one thing that I may not have explained on that one, or maybe I didn't do it in as much detail because, well, obviously Sifu was still around, and like I didn't really want to say, is that I've spent, you know, a decent amount of time with both gentlemen, Sifu Leung Ting and Sifu Kernspecht, privately, outside of training, in the car, having conversations. You know, like, it's different when you've just sat at a table with someone where you're not constantly having to talk. You're just like, you're together with someone so much that it's like, it's a normal thing.
You're
right?
enjoying the festivities.
Yeah. And I've had the chance to witness both of those gentlemen in, well, I'm not going to say a crisis, because these things, but let's say dealing with a problem, and watching how both of these guys solve a problem. Sifu Leung Ting is a lot more of a shoot from the hip kind of, very reactionary kind of person. When something happens, he immediately wants to lash back in the most direct and aggressive way with zero subtleties.
Okay.
Sifu Kernspecht is like an old European general. He's going to plan this whole thing. And he's going to plan it in such a way where you think you won, and you gave him everything he wanted.
Oh,
like,
wow.
He's going to be like so far ahead. You're going to think you won, and he's going to end up with everything that he originally wanted, and you gave it to him willingly, with no conflict. So everyone is happy. So the dilemma we had with this, and I'll speak a little more openly only because Sifu has passed. So I'll tell some of the stories that I didn't tell that first time. And also, this concerns my seeing Giuseppe, who's one of the sweetest gentlemen you can ever imagine. Sifu Giuseppe wanted us to meet with Sifu Leung Ting in Hong Kong. He wanted Sifu Kernspecht to meet with. And the reason is because up until that point, which was last year, so 2023, Sifu Kernspecht and Sifu Leung Ting had not like sat face to face since maybe 2009. So the crazy thing was, it had been almost 14 years since they sat across from each other, even though Sifu Kernspecht was still representing Leung Ting. The odd thing was, I had ceased representing Leung Ting maybe 12 years before, but I had meals and meetings with Leung Ting far more recently than my Sifu, who still represented him. All right. Like, so I had seen him more recently, and I wasn't even representing that association anymore.
Holy mac.
And Sifu really didn't want to meet with Sifu Leung Ting, I'll be quite honest, because for him, at least as far as I understood it, he had closed that chapter of his life, just like I had. Like, I don't have any ill will towards Sifu Leung Ting, but my entire chapter with Sifu Leung Ting is closed. Because when I quit his association, I wrote a resignation email where I said everything I wanted to say, and I did it in a polite and respectful way. There was no parting shot of an FU on the way out. It was very like, hey, thank you for everything. You gave me a career, you gave me all this, and I appreciate it. Thank you very much. Done. So everything that I had given Sifu Leung Ting monetarily, support-wise, or whatever, I said, thank you for that. I'm moving on my own. thank you for it. I still kept his photo in my school.
Mhm.
So like even Bay Logan, who was always trying to get me to reconcile with Sifu Leung Ting, I was trying to get him to understand, like, I don't have any ill will. Like, literally, I have nothing. Like, it's done. It's okay. I have nothing to say to him. I'm pretty sure I know what he thinks about me, because anyone who leaves his association, he thinks the same way about. I'm not going to be able to change that. I'm at peace with not changing that, and I'm totally fine doing my own thing. So I don't have unfinished words. Like, I still need to sit down and have this talk with Sifu Leung Ting.
Okay.
So I'm fine. Sifu, from what I understand or understood, was the same way. Regardless of what happened between them, he was over it. He's moving on.
Yeah.
But I think
He's
that
got
seeing
bigger and better things to do.
Seeing Giuseppe, who's such a sweet, like, kind-hearted man.
Yeah.
He's that optimist who really just thinks, like, yeah, but if I can get them together again, and maybe they could feel like it was like old times, and then, like, he is that kind of staunch optimist, right? And that's why you have to love him, and that's why it's like it's difficult to say, like, no, I don't want to do it, when he's like, because even Giuseppe last year said, maybe this is the last time they'll get to see each other, and it would be. And I totally understood that, but I understood why Sifu did not want to see Sifu Leung Ting. I did not want to see Sifu Leung Ting. Giuseppe really did want to see it, and so we were kind of like forced to see him. Now, in hindsight, I think it was a net good. It was the last time they would see each other. Everything kind of went off fine. But Sifu didn't want to be there. I didn't want to be there. The only one who wanted to be there was Giuseppe.
Okay.
Maybe Sifu Leung Ting, right? Because I think he was trying to convince Sifu Kernspecht to invite him back to Europe. So anyway, we have this dinner that needs to be planned. But before the dinner is planned, I sat with Sifu. Sifu's like, hey, you meet me at the restaurant in the hotel. He says, we're going to plan everything that's going to happen tonight. And so we sat there.
Yeah. Strategist.
And he planned everything that was going to happen that night with Sifu Leung Ting, because we both knew Sifu Leung Ting's bag of tricks. In recent months, he was getting his former students to, like, apologize to him for leaving, and they're kowtowing to him, and then he posts those videos and stuff. And so there was a lot of speculation on our side that he was going to try to make it seem like, oh, we're not just having dinner with him because we all happen to be in Hong Kong. We are crawling back to him for whatever reason.
Wow.
Right? And Sifu didn't want that. I didn't want that. We didn't want that coming over. So we had a bunch of demands, like no videos, this, that, and the other thing. But for about an hour and a half, which was a couple hours before the dinner would happen, Sifu and I strategized everything that would happen that night. And that's when I saw the difference between how Sifu Kernspecht did things and Sifu Leung Ting. Like I said, Sifu Leung Ting's a much more straightforward, shoot from the hip, but very reactionary.
Yeah.
So if someone pisses him off, he's going to go guns blazing and write a statement and just hit back. But very predictable. All right?
Okay.
But Sifu Kernspecht's like, all right, well, if he tries this, then we will do this. But he also occasionally likes this trick. And when he does this trick, we will do this. And if he tries to pull this old one, we're going to go here, here, and do this, this, and this. So what he did was he just came up with these plans and these contingency plans based on past behavior, so that no matter what happened, we knew exactly what we would do and we wouldn't fall into one of his 3 or 4 very predictable traps. And it was exactly as it went off. I mean, I really saw, like, Sifu is a strategist, very cunning, very smart. He knows the lay of the land. He knows how everything's going to happen before it happens. He's planned, he's checked, he's double checked. And that was the big difference. Sifu Leung Ting is not nearly as cunning as Sifu Kernspecht was. And we had the whole thing planned out perfect. And it was a cool, of one of the last things I would do with my Sifu, just to kind of see his brilliance at work again and go like, yeah, I mean, you've learned all these life lessons from observing someone. About them, maybe when you deal with them, when you plan something with them, you shore up some of that past experience and use it to make sure everything goes off without a hitch. And that's the difference between someone with wisdom versus someone who has the knowledge but doesn't apply it, right? He's there willing to stop, sit, and think, and that was really incredible. And it showed a huge difference between the two of them and how they did stuff.
Okay.
I think why Sifu Leung-ting, to a certain degree, wishes he was that cunning and plan and well planned and could orchestrate something like that, because he's ultimately not like that. So yeah, the Hong Kong trip, kind of in the back of my mind, I felt that might have been, it would certainly probably be the last big trip I took with my Sifu. I assumed I would have come to Germany at least once or twice and seen him again. But yeah, I mean, these things happen so quickly. It's always a constant reminder that you don't have forever to do the things you want to do. You have to seize the moment.
Yeah.
You have to enjoy the present. You have to train. I often hear it sometimes with people like fans of the podcast.
Yeah.
They've been fans since, let's say, even just a hypothetical, since Dudes of Kung Fu.
Right.
And they're like always very supportive and stuff like that. And they're like, oh yeah, man, I can't wait to get back into training. Can't wait to get back into the training. And they've been saying that for 10 years. And it's never too late to start. And if you haven't done it in a while, just get back on it. Like, so like this whole like, oh, I got to get in shape, and then some fuck it, just fucking get back into training.
Yeah, I always hear people that before they want to start martial arts, say, no, I gotta get in shape first.
Yeah,
before I start.
That's a smoke screen.
Yeah. No, you actually get in shape by doing it.
Yeah, but it's a smoke screen people put up to delay commitment. It's common objection when people, so all right, it comes time to join the martial arts class. You're ready to go. Well, I think I need to get into shape first. As if some lazy dude came to a martial arts school, realized they were out of shape, went on an 8-week training circuit, came back, is like, I am now ready to start martial arts. Yeah. Happened never. It's an excuse because people know that joining the martial arts school, that is the step. Like, now you're going to do this. This is something you do. And it's just another way to kind of like delay it, right? So I'm not saying that like if you're ready to go and you want, just do it. Don't worry like, oh, I haven't trained in a few years. That's crap in your brain. That is like, do it right now. Who cares? Who cares what you didn't do for the last few years? Best time is
always now.
Right now, right? You get back into it. You start it for the first time, or you restart, whatever. But I've often like been connected to people on social media where like, oh man, yeah, I really wish I could like start learning or do this or whatever. And I realized like, they've been saying this for 12 years. At some point, the ability to start training has presented itself, and they have put it off for want of learning with this one particular person or whatever. And I think that like, one of the things that gave me a little advantage over some of the other Kung Fu brothers, I think, when I was learning from Sifu Leung-ting, is they were always like, oh, well, I didn't quite get it. Next year, I'll get it again in the seminar. And while, of course, skills take time, you need to revisit them, you need to come back, you need to take follow-up lessons or whatever. Their attitude was like, well, I didn't get it this time. I guess I'll get it next time. I'd be like, let me find the answers to these things now so I can train it so that next year, when I have access to my instructor again, I'm already done with this topic or can already move on to the next one. And they're still waiting to ask a question on it, right? So I never took it for granted that he would always be there, not foreseeing that he was going to pass away soon. But hey, I might leave the association. He might not want to travel anymore. He might not be able to teach. Why all these people learn from their martial arts instructor, as if their martial arts instructor is always going to be there, is beyond me. You need to go and get as much as you can. I don't mean just by asking questions and not doing. I mean by training, by absorbing, by assimilating, by understanding the context and being really serious about it, because you don't know how much time you have.
Wow.
And I think, seeing that Sifu's life work is now finished. And I know for a fact from messages he sent me in the weeks before he passed away, how much more he still wanted to do. That you have to always be mindful of that. Keep moving forward, and you don't take today or any other day for granted. Yeah.
On this trip, not knowing what you know now, but what was one of the coolest moments that you had with Sigong? Like, you look back at it, you're like, man, that was so cool to have that happen?
So I think partially because Andrew, our editor, took all these great candid shots, which are always awesome, right? Because candid shots are more real than pose shots, right? So he took a series of candid shots of me and Sifu in the MTR station.
Right.
When I was holding his arm, because, he was older, you got to go up and down stairs. So I just want to make sure he doesn't fall. So I'm holding his arm in the MTR station. We sat next to each other and we were talking. And we were having conversations about Sifu Learning Tang, this, that, and the other thing, Wing Chun, whatever Wing Chun people talk about.
Yeah.
And Andrew shot a bunch of like candids, and you can just kind of see me like kind of looking at my Sifu and like just being in my element, and having those moments with him, I think were some of the best I've ever spent with him. And to have it there and to have that documented now is pretty amazing.
Right.
We are going to be in Germany. For the EWTO is having a memorial seminar on February 15th for Sifu Kernspecht. It's like a seminar plus memorial. I'm going to be there with Nicole. Perhaps a couple other City WT people are coming as well.
Right.
But it'll be great to see some of my old training partners and people that I used to train under over there as well. So I'm super excited. But it is going to be weird to go to Germany without Sifu there. And so it's a new reality that I got to get used to.
What would you say on that trip, being that it was the last trip with your Qigong, what was it that your takeaway, your main takeaway from Qigong?
The problem with questions like that is that you have to say that there was only one thing you took away. All right, why does it only have to be one thing? I mean, a couple things that I took away is that the work never ends if you're doing. I don't mean like you got to be in your 90s teaching bong sao because you don't have any money in the bank. I just mean that if martial arts is something that you enjoy, martial arts is something that, it's your passion, you will not stop doing it because your brain is constantly there thinking about it, right? It's problem solving. And Sifu is definitely like that. So that idea that this thing that I have in my head that doesn't stop, that's probably not going to stop. And if it does, that'll definitely be time to move on and do something else, I think. So that's the one thing. And the other one is no matter how much you're doing, it never seems to be enough. Sifu lived multiple lifetimes in his one lifetime and published books and built an organization and built an empire and did all of these amazing things. Like you would look at his life and you would go like, wow. But he would say, I still got to do this. I still got to do this. I still got to do this.
Yeah.
And I think that is
not satisfied. I like that.
But that's the way it kind of is for everyone. I mean, you have to take satisfaction in the things you accomplish, but there's always going to be a wanting for more or better. And as long as you have a healthy grip on that, that can be a good motivator to constantly improve, as long as it doesn't make you feel like you're inadequate because you haven't done those things yet. And that's kind of where I feel like the other books I want to write, the projects I want to do, you always have a little minor sense of dissatisfaction, enough to keep you going, not enough to make you depressed about your current situation. It's enough to keep you going. Realize that this moment is all you have, and get as much done as you can, because at some point you're not going to have an option to get any more done. And that's all I got to say about that. All right, everyone. Well, I hope you enjoyed that episode of The Kung Fu Genius. As always, don't forget to subscribe to The Kung Fu Genius. Hit that bell for notifications. Support us on Patreon or through YouTube memberships, or just send us a PayPal donation, the best nation, the donation, in the link below. And as always, I'll see you guys next time.
Word is I'm a kung fu genius. Technique speaks for me, not lineage. Forget Jet Li, cause I'm the one. Many call me seafood, but to you I'm Qigong. And I produce masters. You surpassed us. Your kung fu stiffer than corpse and caskets. City Wing Chun is the house I built. Violate the gate and your blood gets spilt. Alex, Richter, always the victor.
Or any other day, for granted.
Yeah.
And that's all.
Hold on. I want to ask you a couple questions before we finish.
My dismount. New reality that I got to get used to, and that's all.
My other question.
All right, everyone. Well, I hope you enjoyed that episode of
Lots of when we get there, he's going to try to pull this, that, or the third. If he tries to pull this, we got this. Tries to pull that, we got that. And if he tries to pull the third, we got that.
This is the worst intro I've ever heard. All right.
All right, peeps. On today's episode of the Kung Fu Genius, the genius will be discussing his time with... No, not time.
His late Sifu.